All right, we have a very special edition of the Death Lineup here. The day before the 4th of July, we had to get one in because there's nothing but craziness going on in the world of the Golden State Warriors. My co-host of We Want Winners is substituting for Brian today. Rod Adams, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. I am honored to be in this chair. You and Brian do such a good job. And as I told you when you asked me if I'd be willing, I'm not a professional at football, but I do spend a lot of time kind of analyzing and going over the numbers. This is definitely just a heart play with me for the Dubs. I am completely irrational when it comes to all things Warriors, and yeah. So this is it's kind of weird because I mean I don't know these people obviously, but it's kind of emotional. Those dudes, um, like the Warriors are the first team I remember
hmm
following. I can remember back to when I was little. My uncle, there's actually pictures of me with my uncle as a baby. Well, not a baby, as a 2 year old at the finals. I don't remember any of that, but what I do remember is going to the games and Franklin Muley's girlfriend kind of took a liking to me. She, had the big hair and was a redhead, and she liked me. And so I would get to go sit down on the floor. And like I said, I've just been a Warrior fan all my life. So to see these guys, and I wasn't living here when the Splash Brothers became a thing. In 15, I was in Louisiana and I was working night audit. So I would get to watch the games while I was working. And I'd be down there screaming and hollering because if you remember, we had some like really, really crazy like comebacks, and it was really just like a fairy tale season. And you just kept waiting for it to, you know, the carriage to turn into a pumpkin,
Yeah.
but it never did. And if you had told me that I would witness another 4 championships, I would not have believed you. I didn't see it in the cards. So this whole run has been, I'm really appreciative. And I see fans, and you see, and I think maybe it's just the way of fans. It's like, I don't feel that there's the appreciation for these guys that I believe is due. And I've always said, I say it in joke, but halfway true. I'm not here for no Klay slander. It's just
Yes.
those dudes they are made men as far as I'm concerned. And so it's been kind of emotional for me. So I'm glad to be able to come here with you and kind of vent.
Well, I mean, this is kind of perfect for you to do this show because this was a pretty emotional week for the Warriors. Brian and I did a show a couple of weeks ago, and we were basically like, okay, gun to your head. Is Klay leaving or is he staying? And Brian was the one who was like, it just feels like he's leaving. I can't, it doesn't make him, it didn't make him feel good to say that. And I was like, I think Klay is going to think about this and he's going to have this epiphany and he's going to be like, why do I want to reinvent the process? I already know how things work. And that was actually the opposite from what it sounds like. If it sounds like he really needed to get away from this Warriors process in order to clear his head, in order to feel respected, in order to kind of get away from the chaos of what has been, last couple of years. And let's start at the beginning of the timeline. And I think this goes all the way back to the end of last season. The Warriors make it to the second round of the playoffs. They lose to the Lakers. Klay has a bad game 6. Everyone kind of had a bad game 6, and they lose to the Lakers. I remember this day specifically because JJ, my youngest, was going to walk at U of A, and he decided he already did his department graduation, and Klay and Steph were playing against the Lakers, so he wanted to watch the game instead. So
Wow.
we skipped the big at the football stadium. We skipped the big graduation, and we went to watch the game. And sitting there, and you're kind of like watching this game, going like, if this is the Warriors in the way that we think of the Warriors, they're gonna pull this game out of their ass, and they're gonna force a game 7, and then they're gonna do what they usually do. And they did not do that. They did not pull that game out of their ass. And that was a moment where I was like, this did not feel how it normally feels when we're in these situations.
Yeah.
So at that point, it sounded like Klay wanted an extension, or he didn't want to go into free agency. And we kept hearing this number, 2 for 48. And now we're hearing, well, we're not sure what that 2 for 48 really meant. So if you go to the end of last season, who really knows? I'm sure the story will come out, but we're hearing that 2 for 48, may not have been super.
Never happened.
It may not have been something that he was interested in either, because I'm sure 2-year deal to him was like, okay, that's the starting negotiation. That's not where we end at. And you look at, he gets a 3-year deal with Dallas, and then supposedly the Lakers were trying to
4 for 80 is what they say.
4-year deal. Yeah, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So at that moment, the Warriors do not make him a priority. And this is after they already made Draymond a priority. They already made Jordan Poole a priority. But I think you can look at that Jordan Poole contract as they signed him knowing that they were probably going to be able to trade him. So who really knows exactly how they thought about that Jordan Poole contract? They did Andrew Wiggins a solid. Andrew Wiggins probably took less money on the market to come back to the Warriors. So that has to be said. So we go through all of last season. We keep hearing, Klay and the Warriors have kind of stopped talking. They've stopped negotiating. Klay's team's like, I don't want to talk about this during the season. This is over and done with. We'll wait to the end of the season. And as we got to the end of the season, this dude was emotional. He was frustrated. He was sniping at reporters and all of that. And some of it was the fact that he was playing well all the time, and he sort of couldn't predict when he was going to play well. He had to deal with coming off the bench for the first time, I think, since his rookie year. He had to deal with the idea that the rook, Brandon Pajemski, had kind of moved ahead of him in the rotation at times. And we saw that. We saw a lot of this in there's one game. There's 2 games that sticks out, and I'll go back a year. You remember that Phoenix game where he was throwing the 4 rings up at Devin Booker, and then the Warriors have a really bad game. Klay has a bad game. And it was one of those moments where you're like, yeah, I get it. You got 4 rings, but we're getting run off the floor here. Like, this is not good. This is not the time to throw up the 4 rings. And then you fast forward, I believe it was Minnesota, and him and McDaniels, the game starts. It just basically starts. And Klay's trying to bring up the ball, and McDaniels is like, you're not. You're just not going to be able to do this. And so Klay pushes off. He's pushing off. And then down the court again, they get into this thing where they're like tugging at each other's jersey. I think McDaniels actually had Klay's jersey, got it caught. Klay was trying to push him off. Fight starts. Draymond puts Rudy Gobert in a reverse, rear naked choke, and all hell breaks loose. And that was an ugly moment in the season. And you just never saw Klay like that before. Klay let his play do the talking for him. He never had to, be that demonstrative, except for maybe after he ices a 3 right in somebody's eye. But those 2 moments kind of stood out to me as like, he's really frustrated at not being able to do what he usually can do on the basketball court. So now we get to this postseason, and the talk in Warriors land is, okay, like what are they going to do here? Like, they obviously have to make a move. Is Klay a part of that? We're not sure. And it looks like the priority was, first and foremost, we have to improve this basketball team. And what we do with Klay is kind of after all of that. And if you're Klay and you're like, my blood, sweat, and tears is on this floor here, I want to be prioritized a little bit better. And Joe Lacob is like, sorry. Mike Dunleavy's like ice cold to this dude. I could very much see how he got in his feelings about how he was being treated because of the fact that he's Klay Thompson. He doesn't have to pay for a drink in the Bay Area because he is Klay
Ever.
Thompson. And
I
so
think.
well, I was going to ask you, so after that long preamble, do you understand from both sides kind of how the prioritization worked out here?
Absolutely. I definitely first understand where Klay is coming from, because I was a person who, again, you have to understand where I'm coming from. I just assumed that they would all retire together, or even if Steph played longer than them, that they would all retire as Warriors. That I just could not fathom a circumstance where that wasn't the case. But then, Dunleavy gets the shit. Excuse me. He gets talked about, but I do believe. I know Myers has joked about it, but I do believe that this is what he was brought in to do. I believe now. The more and more as things have gone along, Bob Myers saying he didn't want a part of any of this.
Yeah,
kind of seems to ring true, because this is dirty business, dirty work. I would just as soon take TV money. I'm sure that's not the only reason he took the TV money, but this has to be. I can understand this being a part of it, that having to have these tough conversations and making these tough decisions for guys who have been such a big part of your legacy and this franchise's legacy. How could you? I mean, unless you're Bill Walsh, this can't be easy. I mean,
yes.
it's
Bill
just
Walsh is a great example of how this works.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. He, guys like, Lot is the one that was my baptism into this being a business. I mean, there's no way the Raiders should pay him less money to go play. And I get it. If you want to say that the third year of that contract, and that proved out to be true. The third he was an all pro, if not all pro, he's definitely Pro Bowler his first year in Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
And then
was he in Oakland or was he in LA?
Well, LA with the Raiders, Oakland Raiders. You're right. LA.
Okay. I was just trying to remember the time frame.
Yeah, I get it confused. But yeah, he he played well the first year, and then the second year was kind of and then the third year wasn't great, and then those Jets years we kind of want to just forget.
Yeah.
But so Walsh was right from a football standpoint, but as a young person, it was like to see that the Raiders actually paid him less than it just didn't make sense to me for somebody who is, by all accounts and in my mind, on the Mount Rushmore of 49er football. It just didn't seem, fair, for lack of a better words, that he would have to, finish his career somewhere else. But it was how I learned that this definitely is a business. And to Walsh's credit, now that I'm older, he, Eddie D kind of talked that family stuff, but Walsh, you can't find a quote of him doing that. He never talked about, got it twisted as far as, we are family and this is that. That's where it gets kind of weird to me, is when, teams and coaches talk that stuff, but then, make business decisions. Don't, that's fine. If it's going to be business, it should just be business. Don't, when it comes time for, players to make sacrifices and whatnot, don't be talking about, taking one for the team when you're not going to take one for the players. So, that's that's like a bigger conversation. But it seems like you said that this was something that was brewing for a long time. And now that when I listen to your timeline, it kind of makes sense. All those incidents, every one of those incidents. Again, you know, I'm glass half full. I had kind of always chalked all those things up to, Clay's competitiveness, and
Mm-hmm.
I knew that, it was clearly clear that the injuries and the comeback from that took a toll on him, because you could see as the build up of him coming back, that one night where he's on the bench, sobbing,
Yeah.
it like unconsolable. I mean, it that was super endearing. The fact that he cares that much. So yeah, it's been tough, but like you say, when you step back and look at it objectively, this seems like this was something, a long thing coming, because especially when you outline all the other deals that were done in the interim, if they were going to take care of him, you would have thought it would have happened before now.
Now, if I'm trying to understand the Warriors' mindset, and maybe this just was not communicated to Klay, and maybe this would not have worked in communicating with Klay either, which is there's this thing called the second apron when it comes to how much money you can spend against the cap. Joe Lacob was willing to go over the cap and pay the repeater tax, as long as the Warriors were competitive. But when they introduced the new CBA and had the second apron, the second apron actually is built to force you to not continually go over the cap. Like
It's a hard cap.
You legitimately take away things that you can actually do. It is there for the folks who didn't like what Joe Lacob was doing and who didn't like.
It definitely is a Joe Lacob. That CBA was negotiated with people like him in mind,
Steve Ballmer.
who have unlimited, well, not, I guess not unlimited resources, but have resources and are willing to spend them. They aren't, they strike me as guys who aren't necessarily running this as a business necessarily. If they're winning, they're willing to spend whatever it takes to keep the team competitive. And I'm sure there are a lot of owners who aren't as financially positioned, don't like that. So
Yeah, and so it looked to me, if I pull back a little bit, I go, okay, it's pretty clear Lacob doesn't want to hit that second apron. So that's first and foremost the goal, is to get underneath that second apron. The second goal was to add a third person to this Steph Draymond mix. With that mentality, you are essentially telling Klay you are no longer one of the big three. You are more of a periphery kind of player. You are additive. You can help us do things, but we don't expect you to be a superstar on this team. So that's a hit, obviously, to him, because he looks at 2 years ago and he sees himself hitting big shots against the Celtics in the finals, and he probably thinks like, look, I can still do that. So you have those two things happening. So they go and chase Paul George a little bit.
And he was sneaky good late last year. I mean, his shooting, he stuck it up, in the beginning, but towards the end, it was much better, according to the stat geeks. They say
If he goes 5 for 10 against the Kings in that play-in game instead of 0 for 10, we might be talking about something a little different. I don't know if that would have made that big, but he actually went out playing one of his worst games when they needed him to play well. So that was kind of a tell. If you are on the Joe Lacob side of maybe Klay doesn't have it like he once did. Well, Klay told you in that game, which was very important for the Warriors to win, to actually make the playoffs. Klay told you, if you believe that, then you might be right. So they chase Paul George. the Clippers were unwilling to do business to make that deal work. So when Paul George figured out that he was not going to be traded to the Warriors because the Clippers didn't want the package that the Warriors had in return, he opts out, and then he is a free agent. I think he's headed to the 76ers. And the only way he was coming to the Warriors is if he opted in, so you could do a sign and trade, or so you can actually just do a regular trade. So Klay knows that if you bring in Paul George, maybe the Warriors don't even think about bringing him back. Now they don't get Paul George. So maybe if you're Klay, you're like, okay, like, now we got to talk. And the Warriors are like, no. We got to figure out this thing with CP. The Warriors had an option on Chris Paul's contract for $30 million. And the only reason to opt in to that contract is if it was a trade piece. And they could not deal Chris for what they thought was a worthy deal. And so they got out of that, and Chris became a free agent. He looks like he's signing with San Antonio. And there seemed to be an offer on the table. And I was actually interested in your thoughts on what this offer was. It sounds like Chris Paul and Andrew Wiggins for Zach LaVine was on the table for the Warriors to take, and they said no. Mm-hmm. Would you have also said no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My brothers are Chicago fans, and I was saying way back before the season even ended that you're going to have to attach picks to get somebody to take Zach LaVine. And apparently, according to Bobby Marks, nobody's even interested in that. They're not even interested in LaVine and a first to take that contract. So, yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. And I don't know, he's a good player when he's healthy, but that is a question mark. And I don't know how additive he is here anyway. So, especially for the money you're paying. So,
yeah, I mean, his job would be to simply be a second scorer next to Steph. And, hopefully offensively, you give the opposition a little bit of fear that when both of those guys are on the court, yeah, if you double Steph and maybe this dude's open and he's attacking you, but not enough for what is feared
not for what they're paying.
The worst contract in all of basketball, which is, I actually like Zach LaVine too.
Mm-hmm.
Not at that price, but also he's got some wheels issues with the legs. And if you remember, I know Vince Carter is going to go on the Mount Rushmore of slam dunk champions. Zach LaVine has got to be like right next to him, because
and that's the thing.
Dunk contests were awesome.
And that's the thing is that it's more exacerbated by the fact that that's his game. And, when you have leg issues and athleticism it's his game. Vince was able to transition into an excellent 3-point shooter after his injuries, but LaVine has not, shown. I mean, he's a lot younger still, but he has not shown the ability to do that. So,
yeah.
If he's not dynamic and attacking the rim with abandon, then he's diminished. He's just not the player, especially like you say at that price. He's not that you have buyer beware. So.
Someone may talk themselves into that price at some point because the cap is going to go up. But
and eventually that contract won't be as bad, like you say, as the cap continues to climb.
Yeah, and I'm not mad at the Warriors for saying no to that. They don't want to be saddled with that deal. They don't see him as a good enough player to take that risk. Okay, so now you don't have CP. You've made that decision. You lost out on the Paul George deal. So if you're Klay, you're like, why are they not now making me a priority? And at this point, from what I have read and what I've heard from Anthony Slater, Tim Kawakami, our local guys, and then reading a lot of the national media, there were opportunities for the Warriors to kind of earn back a little love from Klay, and they just did not take advantage of it. Joe Lacob, about a month and a half ago, invited him out to play golf, and Klay went out there thinking that maybe this was somewhat like talking business. And Joe Lacob, I guess, has this he just doesn't talk business when it comes to things like that. So they didn't talk business at all. So you're just bringing Klay out to play golf. And I'm sure Klay thought this is kind of weird. Like boss man is just wants to hang out.
Just socializing.
Right. So, maybe he took that as a little bit of disrespect, as in like, dude, why are you wasting my time? We're not homies. Like, what's going on?
And then free agency starts, and apparently he started making the rounds. I know he was in Denver, and apparently LeBron was in his ear, and Kyrie was in his ear. So you got that happening simultaneously, and it's like,
they're not respecting you, Klay. They don't got your back. Like, can you imagine?
It's radio silence from the Warriors. So I mean, in a vacuum, what is he to think?
Yeah. Okay, so then now, and this may have been after Klay had already decided to go play with Luka and Kyrie. But then the Warriors are talking about trading for Lauri Markkanen, and that's like their next big target. I can't imagine Danny Ainge trades Lauri Markkanen without swindling somebody.
Well, and we don't even have, I guess you could put together a package that, is around Kuminga, because apparently they don't want just picks. They want a player. And I would think, when you talk about Ainge, Kuminga would be the only thing that we have that he would want. We're not going to dump Wiggins on. He's not taking that. And I don't even know if we have the pick assets to do that, especially in light of, apparently San Antonio is a player and they have a bunch of picks. Yep. And while they're not really willing to give up the European dude that they want, but when you've got those kind of picks, it sets up to me to be like a 3-team trade where somebody gives them a player and they get picks and Utah gets picks in that player. I just think that there are that team specifically, but there are other teams not apparently. Orlando still has assets and young players and the space to do what needs to be. I just think there are better options for Markkanen if Ainge decides to move on him than the Warriors. I just don't think that we're really a player.
Historically, Ainge just collects picks. That's just what he does.
Yep. And so, you look at him, you look at BI. I don't think that we can put together a package that's good enough to get these teams to come off that high level of player. Like you said, I don't think we have the picks necessary. And then, I would be hesitant to move off of Kuminga for either of those dudes. I'm not saying he's untradeable, but I don't know that I'd be willing to move him for either of those guys.
So basically, Klay Thompson was not prioritized by this franchise. And I understand, I want Klay to be with the Warriors forever too. Like, I'm not happy that he's gone. I understand if you are a, president of basketball operations and you go, look, we're going to bring back this dude for, $25 million a year. And he actually is playing behind B Pods and Moses Moody. That's not great value. What we believe his value is not the number that we're going to bring him back at. And we have to do that because of the fan base. And I do think, so you got to, they're basically relying on Steph's celebrity and popularity and his historic fandom in the Bay Area. Because otherwise, if you roll this team out the way that is currently designed, they're probably very similar to what they were last year. And I'm not sure that is good enough for this area. But I'm not like, you got that 22 title And I think you have to be okay with that. Now it's just how do you maneuver to the future of what this team is going to be. It's got to be super hard. You want Steph to be the Tim Duncan. You want Steph to be the I guess the Kobe. You don't
not
want
even that, not even Kobe, because they were trash his last.
Yeah.
But
the Warriors could essentially be that too. You don't want
exactly,
it to be that.
yeah, exactly. And that you would have thought that the CBA, as we talked about earlier, has kind of thrown a blanket on that, because I'm sure if left to his own devices, Lacob would spend the money that it would take to keep players around Steph, because it just makes financial sense to be, because Steph is still, he might not be, there's a lot of talk, he might not be top 10, but he's still top 15, and he can be the cornerstone of a championship team if you put the pieces around him. But one thing that occurred to me as you were talking about what that number looks like is I don't know, we'll see if it ever comes out, but what it doesn't seem happened that kind of pissed me off with our other team, the 49ers, is apparently they offered Armstead $6 million when his market value was 14. It doesn't sound like they offered him, it doesn't sound like they made a insulting offer to Klay, even if it just sounds like they were ready to move on. It doesn't even sound like there was a number that
the way that I read it is they would have liked him to wait until they had figured out some other things, and they just didn't have an answer for him. If they had signed him, let's say that they signed him, so you bring back Klay, you let go of CP, you don't win the Paul George chase, you probably don't sign. We'll talk about these guys in a second.
Mm-hmm.
It probably means you cannot sign DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson. So how you can weigh that is Klay Thompson worth DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson? From the perspective of like history and banners and everything, I think some fans would say yes, because I don't think many Warriors fans were all that excited about those two signings. But I'm sure from an analytics standpoint, I'm sure from a lineup standpoint, I'm sure from a pecking order standpoint, especially where they had Klay on the depth chart, the Warriors front office was like, okay, we're going to add two players who are going to be part of an 8-man rotation, instead of one guy who was going to be at the back end of the 8-man rotation and be unhappy being there. And we were going to have to go through another season of him being super frustrated because what he believes he is not exactly what we believe that he is. And so that's how I could see the kind of the hypothesis of what they were doing.
And then you, again, like I said before, you have to weigh this in the background of one, waiting puts Klay in a position where, the musical chairs might all be filled by the time the Warriors figure out what the hell they want to do. And then you've got these other teams, because I know, like, courting, in any kind of courting situation, I'm positive they're not telling him that he's, the Lakers and the Mavs aren't telling him he's going to be the 8th man in any kind of playoff role, even though that might end up being the case.
We need you.
You're going to be the starter here. I'm sure the Mavs aren't saying anything about him closing games.
You're the championship piece. We were just in the finals.
And Luka and Kyrie can get you all of these looks, and we watch what you do is you put on the tape of that loss to the loss to whoever the hell it was they was playing.
Celtics.
Celtics, yeah.
So here's another thing,
and
right?
all of those missed threes, and like you can be the guy who's taking those shots in clutch time for us.
I mean, Clay is a fan of the history of the NBA. He knows how Ray Allen transitioned his career at the end. And maybe, and if Clay's calculus, because this is also part of it, if the Warriors themselves were one piece away from being back in the mix, that's something that Clay would have had to think about. Like, oh, do I want to leave this thing if we have another opportunity to win a title? And I think he also sort of figured out going like, you know what? We are not one piece away. And maybe Dallas actually has a better opportunity with me than the Warriors have with me. And that's
And
also part of it.
it's clear that if the numbers, again, you never know how these things are structured, but he's got the history. His dad is down there in LA. Apparently they offered him more money, but you could make the same case about the Lakers not being just one piece away, and it looks like he took less money for the better
Fit.
better fit and the better. There's no question that the Mavs are. If you're doing calculus, like you say, there's no question that the Mavs are closer to a title than either the Lakers or the Warriors.
Yeah.
And it seems like if you're going to make that move, where he is positioned, there's, if you talk about revenge being sweet, there would be no greater revenge than even if they just made it back to the finals, with him being a key contributor, that would be, some sort of value. I mean, he doesn't need any validation from me. He's a made man as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But that would be, you know, quite a thumb in the eye if he's playing in June next year, and we don't even make the play in.
And then the Warriors are looking at this as, you know, that they don't have as much goodwill with Clay because Clay wants to, they're asking Clay to wait and to just be like, just be patient. And Clay's market could be changing as he's waiting for the Warriors to make a move.
Exactly.
So that goodwill that you may be asking, Clay, give us the benefit of the doubt here. You don't have that because the communication wasn't great during the season. So, yeah, there's lots of things. Like, I don't blame the Warriors for deciding, and this is the business of basketball. I also don't blame Clay of being like, hey, man, they don't want me anymore. I'm going to go find the spot. Like, I'm not going to have the spot find me. I'm going to go find the spot. And I hope that dude plays excellent basketball.
And I'm one who, if anybody deals with me on Facebook, they know I'm one who does not shy away from shitting on management. But I just don't know how do you handle this that would be deemed properly. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to do this. And I see why he feels disrespected, but they haven't publicly, it doesn't seem to me, done anything to disrespect him. But I honor his feeling that way, but I haven't seen anything outwardly that has shown that they've shown him any disrespect. And you just never know. Apparently it's not talked about. Again, you will see, I'm just immersed in the Niners. Apparently Ronnie Lott is still kind of raw about how things happened. And
plan B free agency, him and Roger Craig just being like, what the hell?
And that's not surprising just based on his makeup, but it wouldn't. So it's possible that happens here, and things are never mended. But I just don't. The way Clay, it just seems like once the dust settles and his career is over, that he'll come back and he'll be embraced here, and he'll have a trophy, he'll have a statue, and all this unpleasantness will be forgotten. Hopefully it will be forgotten on his part, because I think I can't imagine that the team would not embrace him with open arms, and I'm sure obviously Steph and Draymond will. So yeah.
I wonder if he gives Monte Ellis a call and just like, man,
these MFers.
do you know which OG he reached out to, which Mavs OG he reached out to for advice? This is per, can't remember if it was Ramona Shelburne's piece or Sam Amick's piece, but there was a Mavs OG who he was kind of asking questions to. He talked to Jason Kidd. I think he talked to Kyrie, but there's like a Mavs OG who he reached out to just to get like an idea about like, how is Dallas? Like what, like how would
I don't think you would ask me if it was Dirk. So it
No,
has
I would not.
I'm thinking it has to be like kind of a deep cut. I'm gonna guess Michael Finley, but he like works for the team.
It was Michael Finley. Reach out to
Okay.
Michael Finley.
Okay.
I think he may have first asked him like, how you gonna do a cartwheel dunk in the slam dunk contest? And then he talked to him. But yeah, so that's a good person to ask about stuff.
My first question to Michael Finley would have been is, if we get back to the Western Conference Finals, are you gonna take my beer too? It was funny. I don't know if you saw, but there was a clip with Paul Pierce was like, "Nah, bro, he's back. You're not taking my beer." As a matter of fact, you get out of here, out of the locker room. You're not a player. So yeah, that was interesting.
I used to really like Michael Finley.
Yeah, he was a really good player. So yeah, that's an interesting callback.
So let's talk quickly about the players that the Warriors did sign. So I mentioned DeAnthony Melton. DeAnthony Melton is still a young man. He is 20. His last season was his 25-year-old season.
Wow.
He's never been a big time scorer, though. His scoring has increased almost every season that he's been in the league. Last year was 11.1 points. Makes his free throws, and he's a formidable 3-point shooter. He shot 36% last year, 39% the year before. Not the most efficient 2-point shooter, especially last year. The year before, he was much better. But they're bringing him in for depth. They're bringing him in for defense. They're bringing him in for just that hustle and that grind. But the one thing that's that I wonder about is him and GP are very similar size-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And he can do some things that Gary can't. And Gary's, probably a little bit of more of a high riser. They have Gary in that dunker spot. But I kind of wondered immediately, like, can you have both of those dudes like 6'2" backup shooting guards on the same team at the same time?
Well, I am shocked that he was 25 last year, because all I know about Anthony Melton is he's always hurt. So I just assumed he was older to deal with, because that's every time I've ever heard about Anthony Melton, and I'm not claiming to be some Anthony Melton expert, but every time I'm watching on League Pass and people are mentioning Anthony Melton, it's talking about him either coming back from injury or him being injured. So it's interesting that I just assumed he was a lot older than that. We would have sat here for an hour before I got to 25, 26 to being his age. So that's interesting. Maybe we can help him, get that figured out. And I don't expect him with Pods and GP and Curry. I would imagine that the minutes load here isn't going to be super heavy. I wouldn't imagine. So maybe he slots in, with that
Small
second
backcourt.
unit. Yeah, I don't like you say. It's going to be interesting to see how that. I gotta imagine. I'm just assuming he's going to be a second unit player. How that works out. With now with Klay being gone. How that second unit looks, like you say, with those two guards there who are both like the same size. That's going to be, interesting. Like they're both apparent. Well, I know GP is, but apparently Melton is pretty feisty defensively. But it's just when you're dealing with bigger matchups, it'll be interesting to see how those guys are able to hold up.
The other player that they signed in free agency is Kyle Anderson.
Slow-mo.
It's so funny because, like, if you would have asked me, okay, what do the Warriors need? And I've said this on this very podcast with Brian, you need to get more athletic, and then you put more shooting around Steph. They got the opposite in Kyle Anderson.
The exact opposite of all of that.
He's not very athletic, and he doesn't
can't
shoot the three at all. Like, he shot the three. He took 0.6 3-pointers a game. So if you map that out to like an 82-game season, this dude took like 53s for the season, and he made like 15 of them or whatever. So
he's like Livingston 2.0. I mean, it's
can he direct an offense though? Because that's what Livingston can do. Livingston,
well, they say
actually.
Again, I don't watch a whole lot of slow-mo, but they say he is pretty natural with his passing. He sees things before they happen, and he is all, he's a Spurs guy. And, Kerr is a Spurs guy, at his core, a pop guy at his core. So I'm not shocked that slow-mo is kind of a guy that he would take a liking to. But, yeah, and again, kind of like the opposite of Livingston in that, he can play all three of the front court positions and can be a small ball five if you need him to. Not nobody's Draymond, but kind of in that vein. So, I mean, he's solid and he can play. He has played on a lot of winning teams. So clearly he's not going to be too big of a minus for you. He can be additive, but again, we aren't really at a place where, I don't know. I maybe if that's the best you can do, I mean, that maybe I just need to calibrate my expectations to a new reality. Because
how much is Warriors fan base going to lose their shit when late in the game Kerr benches Kuminga for Kyle Anderson?
Because he can count on him
the
doing what the hell he's supposed to do.
He's the
rather than what's going to be super interesting to me is to see what these what these chase prices look like if this team is what I think is going to be, because I mean, it was ridiculous for me with a good team. I don't know how you pay those prices. I was looking at I was thinking about going to the California Classic, but we're going to the baseball game.
Yeah, I know. Brian and I have been to the California Classic the last 2 years, and we can't make it work this year.
Yeah. I could only go Wednesday, but I'll be with you guys on Wednesday. So
yeah, we're going to the Giants game.
Yeah, I would rather do that. But yeah, those tickets were, like we went to the Sea Dogs. Those are the only I have not been willing to pay the money that would cost to go to a Warriors game. Just too much.
It is very expensive, and we go near Christmas time every year, and it has increasingly got more expensive every single time that we've gone. So my thought is, we might as well mention the young kid that they drafted, Quentin Post, who is a 7-foot stretch five. He really shoots the three. He was a decent college rebounder, decent at blocking shots, but really you draft him to stretch the floor and to add shooting. And who knows if he's going to, going to be somebody who they can kind of depend on, but he is an older college player. He is actually going to be 24 years old by the time he gets into. I think he's already 24 years old. So he fits the dynamic of what they did last year, which was draft older college players rather than go for like the one and done guys.
Both Zach Lowe and Bill Simmons have talked about the fact that that's going to be with the second apron and whatnot. That's going to be the new, that's why you see teams stocking up on second round picks, is because though taking those shots at those type of older players is how teams are going to fill out their roster, because it's just so much more cost effective than signing free agents. As just you just draft somebody and you pay them, whatever that rookie scale is, and you fill out the back of your team that way. So that is kind of par for the course for where we're at now.
I think the key to this Warriors team is going to be whether or not Kuminga, Moody, and Podziemski take leaps. And that's a lot of wishing.
All
right?
three, yeah.
That's wishing. You're essentially hoping that these guys become better players than they were. And you're really wishing that Kuminga takes it like more than one level. Like, because
And I mean, he's super young, so it's not ridiculous to think that could happen.
There's two things that Moody, I'll say two things that Kuminga will, if he shows this in camp, then you know that he was really working on things that he needs to work on, especially for what the Warriors do. The ability to not be shy, shooting that long three. Now, some of that is the coach kind of yelling at him for shooting it, but just the ability to just put it up there without, kind of hesitating. And the other thing is just handle. You want him out in open court with the basketball, but he has to pull it back so often because he's not confident in being able to break somebody down when he just needs really one move to get to the cup. I think if he worked on those two things, then he knows kind of what he needs to do. And for Mo Moody, it's also handle, and really handle is most important, because this dude loses the ball and catching the basketball. This dude loses the ball so often in times where he's got an easy bucket waiting for him. But those two guys, they really need to take that advanced step when it comes to offensive basketball. And Brandon Podziemski cannot grow, so he's always going to be 6'3" or whatever he is. And he's just going to have to improve his shot, because he likes getting to the cup, and he's got to change his shot a lot because these guys are redirecting him. And really, it's just opening up his game by being a really, really consistent 3-point shooter.
Two things. One, I had always thought it was said that you can't, handle is something you forgot or you don't. But Jaylen Brown clearly improved his this year, so maybe that can give us hope for Kuminga. And then secondly, I'm sure I watch a lot of Warriors basketball, but I value your opinion. It just always seems to me that Moses Moody is like pretty close to his ceiling. How do you feel about that?
I think you're right, but I think he does so many good things, especially, like, you remember the game against the Knicks last year where they just were like, hey, you play Brunson and use your length and affect Brunson, and he did a good job.
Oh, he's a good player, no question.
And then when his three ball is on, but he's got this like long release too, so it kind of takes him a little while to shoot. And he is like a little bit more athletic with his ability to leap than I think people realize, because he'll actually put one on somebody and you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? But it's like, to me, it's the decisiveness in like putting all of those things together. Like, remember when you play Street Fighter back in the day, and if you did this move, it did this thing. And if you did this move, it did this thing. But if you connected all three of those moves together, it's like a kill shot. It's the kill shot, and you win the match. If Moses Moody could put all of those things together in a move, or, instead of doing it, stopping, then doing the next thing and stopping, like, he doesn't have a lot of fluidity to his game. Like, if he had more decisiveness and fluidity, I think he could chain those things together and actually be better. But he may be closer to his ceiling. And really, there were things that he did in his rookie year that you're like, oh, if he keeps growing, he's going to be really good. And then you look at year 3 and you're like, he's not that much different from his rookie
Mm-mm.
year.
That's true. That's true. I agree.
All right. So, the last thing I have for you, we're going to kind of go outside of Warriors here. What is your thought on the Lakers drafting Bronny James and Bronny James getting a guaranteed 4-year contract? I actually I don't know what the guarantees are on that because he is a second round pick. I would have to go back and look at the CBA for second round picks, but as he signed a 4-year deal for close to $8 million. And Rich Paul went on. I think Rich Paul went on TV and was like, "Yeah, we said if you're not the Lakers and you're trying to draft him, he's going to play in Australia next year."
He's made that $8 million in t-shirt sales, I'd imagine.
I think so.
So yeah, I mean, I don't really get involved with the whole nepotism thing because it's just rampant in the NBA. Not to say that that's right, and if you want to take a moral stance on it, I'm not gonna argue with you that everybody should get their opportunities based on merit. That is true. I mean, that's not kind of how the world works, but you're not wrong. For just because the world doesn't work that way doesn't mean that that's not right. So
Right.
I'm not gonna crush you on that. But where I've come down with it is, we're talking about the 14th and 5th or 15th spot on the bench. I don't, does it really matter? And if it played any part in securing LeBron for another 2 years, then it's worth it. I mean, it's all worth it. Like, it's been talking about right across town about all that the Clippers gave up for Paul George to let him leave for nothing. Well, at the time, you make that deal because it wasn't just for Paul George, because it was for Paul George and Kawhi. So even knowing what you know now, well, I guess maybe if you know what you know now, you might do something different. But if you went back in time with what you projected into the future, because there's no way that even the most sage basketball mind could have foreseen that they would win only 3 playoff series. I mean, it would have been unfathomable that it was so bad. So you make it. So the same thing with Bronny. I don't know what that gives you in terms of having Bron back for 2 more years, but
Yeah.
it's better. I mean, it's because, we always, it's been in 49er land. There's been a lot of talk that I go back and forth on about this hardball stance. I guess the Lakers could have played hardball with LeBron because he really didn't want to leave and he didn't really want to play for the Clippers. But I mean, the Lakers have proven time and time again that's not how they treat their stars. They aren't going to play hardball with their stars. They're going to give Kobe Bryant $60 million when nobody else was going to give him $60 million. They're going to give Bron $100 million when, he's 37 years old. I mean, he's still playing at a very high level,
I
but
think LeBron's like 39.
oh, you're right. Yeah, you might be. Yeah, because they're talking about when Bryce comes, he could be like 42 or something. That's crazy. Yeah, but yeah, I am not as excised about it as some people are. How do you where do you fall on it?
I remember I was listening to an episode of a podcast that doesn't even exist anymore. Jalen and Jacoby.
Yes.
Jalen Rose and Dave Jacoby used to do this. Used to be my favorite podcast when they were going
it
weekly.
was so awesome when it in that particular time frame. I mean, there are a lot of podcasts kind of like that now, but it was so different than anything else when that happened. When that first happened. Sorry to interrupt you.
And so I'm sure they weren't the first ones to call it, but they were talking about it like they're like, look, it's going to be awesome when LeBron and his son get to play on the same court together. Now, I think at that time, the expectation was that maybe Bronny was going to be a little bit bigger of a prospect than he actually became. And so, there was a little bit of like, I don't know if it's underhanded, but the business of basketball kind of stuff going on there in order for him to get drafted to the team. I love the idea of the father and son getting to play together. I know there's some people who are like, hey, he took a job away from somebody. I guess it's going to be up to Bronny to prove if he is worthy of being a player. And I hope so. I hope he does. I hope he plays well. I mean, not against the Warriors, obviously, but I hope he shows that he is a good athlete and he can actually play basketball. I think the thing that is so funny to me is like nepotism exists in every single place. Now, some people will say, well, yeah, Joe Lacob runs the team. Of course, his two sons are going to be working on the, in the front office. And to that, I say, okay, but they may have also taken jobs from some other guys who may have been a little more worthy of that position. And I think the thing that I like most about this is LeBron as just a player, not an owner, not an agent. He's just a player. It is a move that for him shows the league and shows the Lakers who actually is the most powerful person in that organization. It's not Jeannie Buss. It's not Rob Pelinka. It is LeBron. And so am I going to be mad? I mean, the ironic thing is Dr. Jerry Buss, he couldn't even figure out who to hand the team over to. He's
which one of them? Which one of them
is it going to be Jeannie? Is it going to be the other, the other sons? And there's a whole documentary about, them trying to work all together.
Turns out that, for all you want to say about Jeannie, she was the most competent of the Buss kids in terms of, I know that everybody seems to respect her as far as what she did in terms of marketing and all of that. I don't know
the one blemish I think is just like the Phil influence and
that's kind of messy.
Relationship.
I can't blame her, but you call it what it is. It is messy. There's no two ways about that. The one thing that came out of that whole LeBron, not necessarily the Bronny aspect of it, that I found interesting was LeBron talking about, well, I'll take this discount, but y'all need to show me first. You need to show me where you're going to spend this money that I'm taking the discount for, and then I'll take it. But then they couldn't show him the money, so yeah, he took it all. But yeah, I think that if
some of the, I actually think Bill Simmons like threw this out. I don't know. Yeah, he's just spitballing, but he said, I wonder if the calculus was Braun knew that they wouldn't be able to bring anybody in that he would have been okay with.
So he was playing chess. I hope that that's the case.
Yeah. I mean, he's somebody who knows his value for one, and you have to give him credit for that. And and this is even outside of his on the court genius. And, if the Warriors and the Cavaliers didn't play in 4 straight finals where I had to constantly root against this dude, and then he goes to the rival Lakers, my LeBron fandom would be at a different level. But because he was the guy who we had to play in the finals all the time, he's more of an adversary in his later years for me as a fan than he was like somebody where I go, oh God, but I'm LeBron over Kobe every day, but
it's more for me. It's more of a respect thing. I can't root for him for all of those reasons you outlined. But again, I'm not really here to be participating in LeBron slander either. He's just so good. So like you say, not only on and off the court, there's just nothing really that you can point to me to shit on him about. I mean, he has handled this from the time he was 18 years old. I guess there were some missteps, but he's handled it so well to have been in the spotlight for so long. It's just he is amazing.
Yeah, there's some teammates who probably felt like they got hit with some shrapnel based on things that came from him, but that's also basketball. That's also, if you want to dig deep, that Magic very much the same way.
Absolutely.
And it's more about, you guys are getting in the way of me winning, and that's kind of how they looked at it. So the whole thing's fascinating, and I'm just, it's just another wrinkle to NBA talk, especially during this offseason. So, Brian, he's in Wyoming. I think maybe
Oh
he's
wow.
visiting the Kanye sessions or something.
Okay.
But his partner, her brother lives in Wyoming, so they're
Okay.
visiting for the 4th of July weekend. But he's also going to go to Summer League, so I may need another guest if I can't get Ben Cruz, who's kind of been our secondary. But now that you got your feet wet here, we may be able to do more
Yeah.
of these. But we will come back soon enough to do some more 49er stuff, though.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's training camp will be here before you know it. I mean, it's like 3 weeks maybe. So yeah, it will be. And obviously I'm going to see you. What is that? That's a week from now.
Yep.
So this
Next
this
Wednesday
time
night.
next week.
Next
This
Wednesday
time
night.
next week we will be
I
taking
got the
selfies.
tickets. I got the tickets.
Sweet. I am really looking forward to it. Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. All right. We're going to get out of here. But first, any 4th of July plans?
I think my dad's gonna be grilling, so I'm gonna go to the gym early and then go try to get out and play golf before it gets too hot or
Oh
too
my God.
crowded, and then come back here and sit on the couch and sit with family and eat barbecue. How about you?
It was
Oh, you found your
not
family's not there, huh? Your
well.
your
Yeah.
wife
So
is.
my wife and my stepkids are in North Carolina. It was 99 degrees here
That's
earlier
crazy.
today. So my plan is to my mom's side of the family. My aunt has a giant home in Monte Sereno, which is like in it may even be in Los Gatos, and so they've had this house since I was like a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And in the backyard, they have this like Olympic sized swimming pool,
Oh
and so
wow.
it's always been like the party house for us. But
Mm-hmm.
as my aunt and uncle get older,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's just the upkeep of hosting this
Yeah.
stuff
Mm-hmm.
has been
It's
really
hard.
hard for them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're allowing people to come over to use the backyard and to use the pool. So we'll be out there. We'll be, speaking of grilling, my grill, I noticed I used it today, and the nozzle which connects the grill to the propane tank,
Mm-hmm.
it was like I could hear it. I was like, "Oh, there's like
Mm-hmm.
a leak in here or something." So I won't be able to grill sausages, which was what I was going to do. So I may have to
Mm-hmm.
do like use the indoor grill or something to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was like bummed out. I was like, man, I had this idea I was going to grill, and they take it over to their house, and then
Yeah, yeah.
the day
Mm-hmm.
before, the freaking thing, the nozzle's busted, so I had to order a new part. We'll see if that fixes it.
Dope.
But yeah, so I hope everybody has a good rest of their week. If you have tomorrow off and Friday off, hope people find some stuff to do that is fun. But
Be
we'll
safe.
be safe. Fireworks, keep your dogs inside, all that jazz. And we'll be back. I'm still trying to find a guest for Thompson to Clark next week because Brad is actually coming into town. And then we'll figure out death lineup. We'll figure out we want winners around when we decide that we need to do those shows. But so hope everyone has a great week. For Rod, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.